Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're stepping into a living room that smells faintly of cinnamon and disinfectant. A place that should feel warm, but somehow makes you shiver. There's tinsel on the banister light, catching in the polished floorboards, and a smile at the door that's just a little too polished to be real. You can almost hear the script in the hostess's head before she opens her mouth. You may not survive an evening like this without biting your tongue or maybe biting back entirely, so keep your seatbelt fastened. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing the constellation our stories make across the map. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a little gentle noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. It had been 6 months since Martin's funeral, and the quiet in my house was no longer gentle, it was oppressive. My son Andrew called less my grandchildren came by, even less than that. And when Claire, my daughter-in-law, did speak to me, there was an undertone I couldn't quite name. That Sunday, I decided to bring over a loaf of my cranberry orange bread, the one Andrew used to devour in college. When Claire opened the door, her smile was showroom perfect, her voice dipped in honey. "Eleanor, you made it. How thoughtful." She took the bread, held it at arm's length like it was a mildly suspicious package, and stepped aside. The house gleamed. Every cushion fluffed, every photo frame perfectly aligned. Claire's family was gathered in the living room, wine glasses in hand, conversations pitched just loud enough to signal they were having a better time than I could possibly add to. "Everyone," Claire announced with theatrical brightness, "Andrew's mother is here. Not Eleanor, not Grandma Ellie. Just a title stripped of warmth." Andrew rose from his seat near the fireplace, giving me a smile I recognized from his boyhood. Only now it seemed practiced, like it had been pulled out of storage for special occasions. "Mom, glad you could come. Sit down." "Oh, before she gets comfortable," Claire cut in, "I was hoping Eleanor might help me in the kitchen for a minute. You know how it gets with big gatherings." In my 68 years, I'd learned the difference between an invitation and a maneuver. This was the latter. Still, I followed her down the hall into a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread, granite counters, gleaming copper pots, and not a hair out of place. "I need you to keep an eye on the oven, and maybe start plating the appetizers," she said, checking her phone like I was already on payroll. "Of course," I murmured. For the next hour, I ferried food to the dining table, while conversation ebbed and flowed around me. Each request was polite on the surface, but carried that subtle sting. "Eleanor, could you top off the wine? Eleanor, the kids need their plates cut smaller. Eleanor, the bread knife's gone dull. Do you have trouble with that at home?" It's funny, no single comment was enough to wound, but together they worked like a slow drip of vinegar on silver. Eventually they leave a mark. Here's your odd fact of the night. Sailors used to polish brass with vinegar and salt because the slow burn of acid worked better than brute force. People can work the same way if you let them. By the time the main course was ready, I'd slipped into the role she'd set for me, helpful, invisible, a background character in my own son's house. And I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was imagining it. But the thing about patterns is, once you see them, you can't unsee them. Claire's concern arrived in gift wrap and left with my dignity. It started small, the way ivy starts one polite tendril on the porch railing. Then suddenly, there's a green fist around the chimney. "You shouldn't have to worry about errands," she said sweetly the next week. "Why don't I order your groceries online? I'll make a list so you don't overbuy." The word overbuy did a little tap dance on my pride. I've managed a pantry since peanut butter came in tins. I can count yogurt cups without supervision. Her list arrived color-coded, of course, produce in green proteins, in red, budget-friendly alternatives in gray, like storm clouds. Reading it felt like taking a quiz I hadn't agreed to. 2 apples, not 6. 1 quart of milk. Freeze extra in ice cube trays. No brand name butter. That last one nearly sent me to the barricades. There are lines a civilization must not cross, and butter is one of them. Light joke number 1. Somewhere in Paris, a pastry chef just felt a disturbance in the force. When I gently pushed back, I like having extra for when the kids visit. She tilted her head, sympathetic as a nurse with a needle. Eleanor, it's just that with your fixed income, we should be mindful. Fixed income. I didn't correct her. The truth sat like a sealed letter under a paperweight waiting. The next incursion came disguised as kindness. Let me help you declutter, she beamed, arriving with nesting bins and a label maker that sighed out perfect little verdicts. Suddenly, my linen closet became a courtroom. Seasonal. Donate. Questionable. A snowman tablecloth I'd used every December for 20 years went into questionable. The label stuck to the cotton with more confidence than I felt. You'll feel so free, she chirped, feeding the label maker again. Decision fatigue is real. She pronounced decision fatigue like a diagnosis, and I watched words do what they do. Best build a framework sturdy enough to hang judgments on. Here's the intellectual note age taught me. Language is a steering wheel. If you accept someone's vocabulary, you often accept their route. Andrew wasn't much help. When he did call, his voice tried to straddle both sides of a fence that didn't exist. She's just trying to help Mom. The pause stretched like taffy. Have you considered keeping the thermostat at 68? It's healthier for sleep. I almost told him my sleep was fine when no one was auditing my blankets. Claire's influence crept into the rhythms of my days. She began sending reminders in the family group text. Remember to unplug small appliances. Phantom power draw. Senior discount day is Wednesday. Please stick to essentials. Essentials apparently did not include my favorite tea. I could almost hear the spreadsheet in her head tisking at bergamot. A week later, she insisted on driving me to the pharmacy, just to see how we can streamline. The car smelled of eucalyptus and new leather. The dash gleamed like a stern forehead. Let's check your app, she said, taking my phone before I could protest. Her thumbs moved with surgical precision. Automatic refill done. And I'll get alerts too, so nothing falls through the cracks. My cracks are quite small, I murmured. But she was already building a scaffold. At the counter, I reached for my wallet. Claire laid a hand over mine, a gentle lid. I've got this. For a second, I let the warmth of her hand fool me. Then she handed the receipt to herself. I'll keep the paperwork, she said brightly. Tracking is key. Control had donned a cardigan and perfect nails. Quirky aside, octopuses keep tools, shells, coconut halves, and assemble little shelters when they need to. Watching Claire arrange my life into tidy containers, I thought if she had 3 more arms, we'd be living inside a Tupperware terrarium. After the pharmacy came the grocery store. She pushed the cart like a general rolling a cannon into place. At the dairy case, I reached for my favorite butter, the one that makes toast taste like a friendly childhood. Claire slid in a store brand. This is identical, she said, with the confidence of a peer-reviewed abstract. Blind taste tests show no difference. Academic phrase number 1, as any peer-reviewed journal would caution, identical is not a term to toss around near a baker. I smiled and put the real butter underneath the budget one. Let the register pick a side. In produce, I picked up 6 Honey Crisps, my small rebellion shining red in my palms. Claire counted like a deputy on inventory day. 2 should be plenty. Somewhere between the kale and the carrots, I decided I would not die on the apple hill. I set 4 back with a soft clatter that sounded like restraint. At checkout, she hovered, intercepting coupons like a goalie. Digital only, she told the cashier, brandishing her phone. The bag boy looked 14 and painfully earnest. "Do you want help to your car, ma'am?" "No thanks," I said. "But could you please tuck the good butter underneath the spinach?" He blinked, then grinned. We conspirators must encourage the next generation. Back home, Claire did a pantry review. "We need to establish a system," she said, writing dates in Sharpie as if expiration were a moral flaw. She stacked the cheaper tea in front of my Earl Grey. "Out with the old, in with the—" "Claire," I said mildly, "the Earl stays in front." Her smile tightened by a millimeter. "Of course." But she left the cheap box angled forward like an ideological billboard. 2 days later, she arrived with a folder. Folders are never good news. I drew up a monthly budget, she announced, sliding it across my kitchen table. The paper was thick. The categories were brutal: groceries, utilities, medical, miscellaneous limit $35. $35 for anything not on the approved list, including joy. "You'll thank me later," she said. "This is how we keep you comfortable long term." The phrase "keep you comfortable" puffed into the room like lavender and stayed like ammonia. I nodded slowly, as if listening to a weather report that predicted hail, and then added cheerfully, "Bring a picnic." There was humor if you look sideways. Light joke number 2. If Claire ever ran for office, her platform would be a label maker in every home. Light joke number 3, her campaign song would be the hum of a vacuum set to Ride of the Valkyries. One evening, she phoned with a new plan. "I've been thinking about your car. Repairs are unpredictable. Gas is expensive. There's a bus stop right at the corner. I made you a schedule." Pages rustled. Downtown pharmacy every 40 minutes. Grocery every hour. And look, you get your steps in steps. At 68, my steps are my business, not a metric. "I appreciate the thought," I said, "but I'll keep the car." Silence with Claire. Just rare as an eclipse. Then a professional sigh. "Eleanor, we just want what's best. That we made me lonelier than quiet ever had. It meant decisions would arrive plural, arm in arm, whether I invited them or not." That night, I stood in my pantry with a cup of the good tea and breathed the soft bergamot steam. It was ridiculous feeling defiant over leaves and butter. But it wasn't about tea. It was about standing on my own kitchen floor and recognizing the coordinates of myself. Age doesn't make you invisible. It makes you precise. You know where your corners are. Still, the drip continued. "A thermostat text 68, please." A photo of my porch light at noon. Let's save energy, a shared calendar invite, budget check-in every Friday, 9 a.m. My life was being managed like a small nonprofit with nervous donors. The last straw was small as last straws often are. I opened my freezer to find neat rows of labeled soups, butternut chicken noodle, minestrone, and my ice cream gone. In its place, a posted sugar isn't great for sleep. See. I stood there, the freezer blowing November in my face, and felt something settle. Not rage, something colder, clearer, a decision clicking into place like a well-made latch. As any decent lab would remind us, a null hypothesis exists until evidence disproves it. Mine had been, Claire means well. The data now suggested a different model. Claire means control. I closed the freezer, put the kettle on, and took out a pen. If she wanted lists, I would make one too. My list just wouldn't be shared. It would start with 3 words I hadn't used yet. Not out loud, not your call. When the kettle sang, I poured carefully the way Martin used to when he couldn't sleep, steam haloing the cup. The house felt too quiet and exactly right at once. On the counter lay Claire's budget tidy boxes, sly as mousetraps. I set my cup on top of it and watched the paper take a faint ring proof that warmth leaves a mark even on plans not meant for you. It was a Monday morning, one of those thin light winter days when the sun can't quite commit. My sinuses felt like they were stuffed with wet cotton, my chest ached from coughing, and my blood pressure pills had run out over the weekend. The pharmacy was only a 10-minute drive, but my old sedan had started making a metallic rattle just enough to make me uneasy. I tried Andrew first. No answer. I left a voicemail, kept it short, call me when you can. An hour later, I tried again, straight to voicemail. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea, looking at the little orange bottles lined up like an indictment, and swallowed my pride. I called Claire. "Eleanor." She answered, like she'd been expecting a telemarketer. "What's up?" "I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm not feeling well and my car's acting up. Could you give me a quick ride to the pharmacy?" She exhaled into the receiver an Olympic sigh. "Oh, today's really packed. I've got yoga at 11 lunch with the girls, and I promised Lily I'd take her for new ballet shoes this afternoon." "It would only take a few minutes," I said, keeping my tone mild. "Can't you just call an Uber? For a $10 pickup, I don't even have the app on my phone." "Well, maybe Andrew can help later." Andrew, who hadn't picked up twice already. "Right," I said, and let her get back to her schedule. 2 days passed. My cold deepened. My joints complained. I counted the cash in my wallet, $37. Enough for my prescriptions and maybe a bottle of cough syrup. I dialed Claire again. "I hate to ask this," I began, "but could I borrow $10 until Friday, just short this week, with the pharmacy?" The silence that followed could have frozen the phone line. "You're asking me for money. Just $10. I'll pay you back Friday." Her voice went flat, then sharper. "Eleanor, I think it's time you faced reality. You're a grown woman. If you need money, get a job. Stop calling every time you have a problem." My hand tightened on the receiver. "It's just, no, I'm serious. This whole helpless widow act is getting old. You want money? Go work for it. McDonald's is always hiring." Her words landed one by one, heavy as stones. Lazy. Old woman. There's a peculiar clarity that comes when someone crosses a line so cleanly you can hear it snap. I heard my own voice calm as porcelain. "You're going to regret this." "Excuse me." "I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you." And I hung up. Here's an intellectual aside. In biology, there's the concept of latent capacity abilities. An organism has, but doesn't use until conditions demand it. That morning, mine woke up. I went to my bedroom, to the closet where Martin's suit still hung. Behind them, my fingertips found the cool steel of the wall safe. The combination dial clicked under my hands, and when the door swung open, there, it was the folder of documents Martin had left me. It had been 3 weeks before his death in a hospital room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and bad coffee when he told me the truth. "I've been investing," he'd said, his voice rough from chemo but steady. "Carefully for 40 years, nothing flashy. Started with $50 a month in '82. Let it grow. I thought we had maybe a small cushion, 20,000, perhaps 30. Martin smiled faintly at my guess. 8 million, Eleanor, in your name. Has been for years." The room had spun. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I've seen what money does to people. I wanted us to live normal. And because he'd squeezed my hand, then I wanted you to know who loved you for you and who loved what they thought you could give them." Now, standing in my quiet bedroom, I understood why he'd made me promise to keep it secret. Claire had just failed the test with flying colors. I closed the safe, slid the folder under my arm, and sat in Martin's old recliner. For the first time in months, I felt not grief, but a steady, almost electric anticipation. Quirky fact of the day in physics: potential energy is stored in an object's position waiting to be released. That morning, I decided it was time to start moving mine. The shift in my perspective was subtle at first, like turning a kaleidoscope a single click. The pattern was still there, but the pieces had rearranged themselves. I watched Andrew and Claire with new eyes, cataloging every tone, every glance. They came by that Saturday to check on me. Claire went straight to the thermostat. 72. Eleanor, that's way too warm. You're just wasting money. She twisted it down to 68 before I could answer. Andrew opened the fridge, shaking his head. Mom, you've got food going bad in here. I know what I bought, I said evenly. But look, this yogurt. I'll eat it before it expires. Claire made a sound like a game show buzzer. This is exactly what we're talking about. You're not thinking clearly about these things anymore. Not thinking clearly at 68 because I bought a week's worth of groceries. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, feeling the old Eleanor, a woman who swallowed her pride to keep the peace, leaned toward the microphone. But I didn't let her speak. I was busy taking mental notes. Maybe sensing the silence, Claire softened her voice. You know, we've been thinking about what you said the other day. About needing money. Yes. Well, Andrew and I talked, and we think it would be good for you to have some purpose, some structure. Andrew stepped forward, not quite meeting my eyes. There's a senior center downtown with a job placement program. Nothing too strenuous, just part-time work to help you supplement your income. What kind of work? I asked. Claire's smile was sugar-coated poison. Well, you know, cleaning services, meal prep, maybe companion care for other elderly people. Things that would suit your skill set. Other elderly people, I repeated. It's honest work, Eleanor, and it would help you feel more independent, more confident. I looked at my son, the man I'd nursed through chickenpox, the boy whose Halloween costumes I'd sewn by hand. Andrew, do you think I should clean houses? His eyes flicked to the floor. I think Claire has a point about having purpose. Purpose. As if raising him, keeping a home, volunteering, and caring for Martin until his last breath hadn't been purpose enough. I let them leave thinking they'd made progress. Then I took out the folder from the safe, spread the statements across my kitchen table, and let the numbers steady me. $247,000. Here's an academic phrase for you longitudinal study. It's when you observe a subject over an extended period to see how they change or don't. My study of Claire was in full swing, and the data was conclusive. That night, I made 2 calls. First, to Robert Chen, the financial advisor Martin had trusted for decades. Robert, I said, it's time to make some moves, quietly. What kind of moves? I want to look at real estate, not to downsize, to upgrade. The second call was to my sister Marian in Phoenix. She was the only one who knew about Martin's investments. I'm ready, I told her. Ready for what? Ready to see what kind of people my son and his wife really are. Marian was quiet for a beat. Let's just say Martin's instincts were spot on. The next morning, the air felt different in my house, charged like before a storm you've been hoping for. I sat with my coffee, the good kind Claire wouldn't approve of, and began sketching the outline of a plan. Quirky aside, some species of cicadas live underground for 13 years, biding their time, and then emerge all at once in a thunder of wings. Sitting there, pen in hand, I understood the appeal of waiting until the exact right moment to rise. The family dinner invitation came a week later, delivered in Andrew's careful, neutral voice over the phone. I could hear Claire in the background feeding him lines. No special occasion, he said. The kids have been asking about you. Claire's making pot roast. My pot roast recipe, I asked. He hesitated. Yeah, 6:30. It smelled wrong from the start. But I missed my grandchildren, and sometimes you walk into the lion's den just to confirm the teeth are still sharp. Friday evening, I dressed deliberately, navy dress, pearl earrings, and my wedding ring. Not for nostalgia for armor, I wanted them to see the competent, self-possessed woman they were underestimating. When I arrived, the house buzzed with more activity than a family dinner should have. Through the window, I spotted strangers in the living room. My stomach tightened. Claire opened the door in a cocktail dress that belonged at a gala not over pot roast. Eleanor, you look lovely. Come in, come in. Inside, the seating arrangement told the story. A single chair faced the rest of the room like a defendant's spot in a courtroom. 2 strangers waited, a woman in a business suit with a clipboard and a man with a leather portfolio. This is Catherine Walsh from Senior Life Solutions, Claire chirped, and Dr. Robert Henley, a geriatric psychiatrist. Andrew emerged from the kitchen, avoiding my eyes. The children were nowhere in sight. Dr. Henley gave a practiced smile. Your family has some concerns about your ability to live independently. My decision-making capacity, Catherine added, pen poised. Nothing to be ashamed of, she said. Many people your age experience cognitive decline after losing a spouse. I stayed standing. I was invited to dinner with my family, not an evaluation. Claire's tone went from honey to Velcro. We thought some professional guidance might help you see reason. Henley opened his portfolio. Let's start with some simple questions. What year is it? 2024, and I'm not suffering from dementia. Defensiveness can be a symptom, Catherine noted without looking up. Here's your intellectual aside in logic that's called a catch-22. If you deny the accusation, it's proof you're guilty. If you agree you're guilty. They moved on to finances. How much money do you have in your checking account? Henley asked. That's none of your business, I said. It is our business, Claire cut in. Because when you can't take care of yourself, it becomes Andrew's responsibility. They spoke of support services, assisted living options, and finally, the word they'd been tiptoeing toward guardianship. You want to take away my legal rights, I said flatly. Andrew looked down. We want to protect you. No, I corrected, you want to control me. I turned toward the door, but Claire's voice stopped me. If you walk out, we'll have no choice but to move forward with the petition. I met her gaze. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you, she said. I looked at Andrew one last time. Do you agree with this? His eyes were wet when he nodded. I can't watch you destroy yourself. I walked out without another word, the drizzle outside soaking into my hair. By the time I reached my car, the fear that had pricked at my spine was gone, replaced with something colder, sharper. Quirky fact: certain glass, when struck just right, shatters into perfect cubes. Driving home, I realized they'd hit me in exactly the right spot. Now, all that was left was to rearrange the pieces into something sharp enough to cut back. Monday arrived like a fresh sheet of paper, quiet, bright, and just daring me to write something irreversible on it. I was in Robert Chen's office at 8:30 sharp, wearing the kind of confidence that comes from a good night's sleep and finally being done with pretending. His space was all glass and tidy edges, the sort of room where money sits up straight and minds focus. Mrs. Hale, he said, Eleanor Hale. That's me, the name suddenly fitting like a ring resized. Are you sure you want to move this quickly? I've waited 6 months, I said, laying Martin's folder on his desk. Quick would have been June. He smiled in that restrained financial advisor way. Fair point. What are you thinking? A home that makes a statement without shouting, I said. Cash. Close fast. I slid a list I'd written at 3 a.m. across the desk. And introductions to an estate attorney and a discreet realtor. He scanned the page, eyebrows lifting a millimeter. All right, let's look. We scrolled through listings with photographs so glossy you could practically smell the polish. A colonial with black shutters and a white porch. A modern place with windows wide enough to see tomorrow. A tutor that looked like it taught Latin on the weekends. Then he clicked on one that made my spine lengthen brick symmetrical quiet confidence. Cherry hills. Mature trees. A kitchen that could heal family feuds. The backyard held the kind of green that forgives you for everything. This one, I said. Don't even show me the rest. You don't want to see it in person first. I trust your eyes and mine. He made calls. I signed things. Wires moved like silent lightning. By noon, the house was mine. Light joke, number one, if only emotional paperwork moved at the speed of a cash offer, therapists would be out of a job. Here's your senior truth of the day: decisive is a muscle. It weakens when you outsource it and returns the moment you lift something heavy for yourself. From there, the day unfolded like cards turned face up. The moving company white glove, the kind that packs your plates like Fabergé eggs scheduled for Wednesday. A car purchase arranged for Thursday morning, a sedan that won't rattle, won't judge, and will obligingly pair with my phone without filing a complaint. Accounts opened at the kind of stores where they bring you water without asking and spell your name right on the first try, and an appointment on Tuesday with Sarah Patel, a top estate attorney who I was promised could unspool a knot without breaking the string. Back home, I started sorting my old house into 3 categories: take, donate, release. The snowman tablecloth Claire had labeled questionable made the take pile out of sheer spite. The label machine in my head printed one word for the whole process: mine. Quirky aside, octopuses aren't the only creatures who make homes out of found objects. Hermit crabs try on shells like prom dresses until one feels right. Walking through my rooms, I realized I'd been wearing a shell that didn't fit small, cautious, apologetic. Time to trade up. Tuesday. Sarah greeted me with the kind of firm handshake that says she sues kindly and wins politely. "Tell me what you want to be true when you're gone," she said, uncapping a pen. "I want my grandchildren educated," I said. "I want their parents to have no control over that money. I want a charitable arm that feeds people who are truly hungry. And I want an emergency plan that makes predatory relatives go limp like overcooked noodles." "Guardianship scares, then," she said dryly. I smiled. "They brought a psychiatrist to pot roast. We'll build the legal equivalent of a titanium umbrella," Sarah said, writing. "Revocable trust now pour over will healthcare proxies lined up letters of intent in plain English so no one can pretend confusion. And a no contact clause that lets you close the door when you need to." "Make the door quiet," I said. "I want my piece to be audible." By Wednesday noon, my old house was stacked with uniform boxes like a skyline. The movers worked with a choreography that felt almost religious. They patted my mother's china as if it were bone-wrapped photos in paper soft as a sigh, and found my wedding album I'd believed lost to the back of a closet. I opened to the page where Martin and I ran under rice like confetti rain. I put the album in a box labeled bedside. Some things should always be close enough to reach in the dark. Thursday morning, I picked up the car, signed exactly 3 papers, and slid behind a wheel that greeted me with quiet. No creaks, no nagging indicators, no commentary about butter brands. The saleswoman walked me through features, then lowered her voice. "You seem very sure." "I am," I said, for the first time in a while. The drive to my new home felt like a ribbon unspooling. The gate opened. The driveway curved as if it had been saving the view just for me. Inside light pooled on the floors. I set one box on the kitchen island kettle mug's tea and thought, this is where silence becomes company again. Academic phrase for the evening, locus of control. It's a fancy way of asking, where does your steering wheel live? For months, mine had been installed in other people's hands. Standing in that kitchen, I felt it click back into my palms. I made coffee on a borrowed machine the stager had left and called Andrew. He answered on the second ring, voice taut, "Mom, I'd like you to stop by," I said. "Today if you can." He arrived before lunch, parked at a diagonal like his coordination had fled under pressure, and stood in the foyer staring up at the chandelier as if it might deliver a sermon. "What is this?" he asked, barely moving his lips. "My house," I said, handing him a cup. "Cream sugar." He followed me to the kitchen in a daze. "How did you—" "Your father was a careful man. He wanted me to wait to watch. I waited. I watched." He set the cup down too hard. Coffee kissed the rim and left a brown lip. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because Martin asked me not to," I said gently. "Because money changes manners, and I needed to see which way yours would shift." He flinched. For a moment, my boy, the one who cried in kindergarten because he stepped on an ant, looked back at me through a man's eyes. Then the shutters came down. 8 million, he whispered. 8.2 last month, I said. But the number is the least interesting part. To you, he said. Mom, this is more than you can spend. Then it will outlive me usefully. He walked to the window, hands on hips, breathing like he'd run a race against someone faster and kinder. His phone buzzed on the island Claire. He didn't answer. Little victory, but I counted it. Look, he said finally, turning back, lawyer energy he doesn't possess, rising like steam. You're not getting younger. You need a plan, trusts, oversight. You can listen, I said softly. I've retained counsel. I've established a trust. I've made provisions for Lily and Theo's education. I watched the relief and calculation fight a quick round on his face. How much, he asked. Enough that their dreams can't be held hostage by anyone's decisions, including yours, I said. It vests when they're old enough to choose their own lives. He shut his eyes. Claire has wanted many things, I said. What she wants most is the one thing she cannot have. What's that? Command. He opened his eyes, and for once there was no script. Is there any way back from this? He asked, voice smaller. From what you tried to do, I said. Guardianship is not a misunderstanding, Andrew. It's a door you kicked at. I took a breath, letting the quiet settle the room. I'm not slamming it on you. I'm installing a lock. He swallowed and nodded, a boy again, disciplined by a teacher he respects. Claire's calling, he said, glancing at the vibrating phone. I know, I said, and she'll call again. He slipped the phone into his pocket. I'm sorry, Mom. I hope so, I said. Being sorry is the first tool in the repair kit. It isn't the hammer. After he left, I walked the empty halls and let my steps echo enough to make the house learn me. I set the kettle on, took out the Earl Grey, and slid it to the front of the cabinet with ceremony. In the freezer, I placed a pint of very real, very sugared ice cream. Light joke number 2. I wrote, budget-friendly kale on it, with a Sharpie, in case Claire ever rates the freezer. Light joke number 3. I considered labeling the wine thermostat adjustment aid, but decided to let future me enjoy that joke privately. I carried my mug to the back terrace. The lawn breathed. Somewhere a gardener clipped a hedge with the rhythm of a metronome. I thought of Martin, how he quietly stacked one disciplined decision on another for 4 decades, and I whispered, I see it now. I see what you were building. Quirky aside to close us out, monarch butterflies don't fly in a straight line to Mexico. They tack and weave, catching thermals, riding invisible highways. Watching the steam rise from my cup, I realized that's all I'd done. Caught the warm air and let it lift me where I needed to go. Claire's call came the next morning, bright and brittle as spun glass. I could almost hear her rehearsed smile through the line. Eleanor, honey, Andrew told me the wonderful news, she began, her voice suddenly dipped in syrup. $8 million. That's incredible. We're just so happy for you. Are you? I asked, letting the question sit. Of course, she said quickly. And, well, I feel terrible about our misunderstandings before. I think we just didn't have the full picture. But now we can move forward together like a family. Family. The word sat heavy like a coat I'd worn too long in summer. Claire. I said, what did you think would happen if your guardianship petition went through? A pause. Then, we would have made sure you had everything you needed. All 8 million of it, I said flatly. That's not fair, she rushed out. We were concerned for your safety. You called me a lazy old woman for asking to borrow $10. She sighed in that careful way people do when they're trying to reset the mood. I was having a bad day, but we can put that behind us, can't we? I didn't answer. She filled the silence with more sugar. Why don't we come over? Bring the kids. Talk about how we can work together on plans. No, I said simply, we don't need to talk. The quiet that followed wasn't awkward. It was the sound of her realizing she'd lost the script. That week, I met with Sarah Patel again. I want trust funds for Lily and Theo, I told her. Full tuition for college and grad school if they wanted, maybe a little extra for their first homes. Sarah's pen moved without hesitation. Amount, $1 million each, and their parents have zero control. They get the money directly when they turn 25. Not even for education expenses before that. No, I'll pay those separately if needed, but I'm not giving Andrew or Claire access to a cent. When the paperwork was ready, I hand-delivered a letter to their mailbox. Inside, in plain language, I explained exactly what I'd done and what they'd lost. If you had treated me with respect and kindness instead of cruelty and manipulation, these resources could have been shared as a family. My grandchildren will always be welcome in my life when they are old enough to choose for themselves. As for you both, I hope you find happiness, and I hope you learn that family is about what you give, not what you take. 2 evenings later, my phone rang. Andrew's number. "I got your letter," he said quietly. "Good. 1 million for each of them. They're good kids. They deserve it. And nothing for us." "What did you think you deserved, Andrew?" He was silent for a long moment. "I think I understand now what we did to you." "Do you?" I asked. "You tried to take control of my life. You brought strangers into your living room to tell me I wasn't capable. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a choice. Is there any chance you could forgive us?" His voice was smaller than I'd heard in years. "I don't hate you," I said. "But trust once broken doesn't grow back on command. If it ever does, it takes time and proof." Academic note of the day. In ecology, there's the concept of succession, how a destroyed landscape slowly heals into something new. But it's never exactly the same forest. Before we hung up, Andrew asked about the kids. I told him they'd always be my grandchildren, and I'd always be here for them when they were old enough to choose. Afterward, I sat on my terrace, the late sun painting the lawn gold, and felt the same thing I'd felt the day I signed the papers for my new home piece that didn't need anyone else's permission. Quirky aside, swans can break a man's arm with their wings if threatened, but most of the time they glide in silence. I was learning to glide. 6 months into my new life, the house felt fully mine. The rooms had learned my footsteps, the garden had learned my pace, and the kitchen always smelled faintly of Earl Grey in the morning. I'd stopped checking the thermostat as if it were a line item for approval 72 degrees when I wanted it 68 when I didn't. Marion visited from Phoenix again. We sat in the sunroom, her with coffee in one of my mother's china cups, me with a slice of lemon cake I'd baked the night before. She studied me with that older sister tilt to her head. "You look happy," she said. "I am," I answered. And it was true, not the brittle kind of happiness you manufacture for company, but the kind that hums quietly in your bones. She asked the question I knew was coming. "Any regrets?" "I miss Lily and Theo," I admitted. "Terribly. But regrets, no. If I'd kept pretending, I'd still be living inside their definitions of me. This way, at least, I'm honest with them, with myself." We were interrupted by the phone. The number was unfamiliar, but something in me knew. "Hello?" "Mrs. Hale. This is Janet Martinez, Lily's teacher. She asked me to call you. She says she's been writing you letters, but her mom won't mail them. She wanted me to tell you she loves you, misses you, and hopes you're happy in your new house." I felt the air shift around me. Did she really say that? She did. She also said she's saving her allowance to buy you a present, but she doesn't know your address. I managed to keep my voice steady. "Could you give it to her quietly? I think that would be fine. She's a very bright girl, understands more than her parents think." After I hung up, Marion handed me a tissue. "That little girl loves you," she said. "I know," I said, "and I love them." 3 days later, Lily's first letter arrived. Purple construction paper, careful second-grade handwriting. "Dear Grandma Eleanor, I hope you like your new house. Mom says you don't want to see us anymore, but I don't think that's true. I think grown-ups just get confused sometimes. I love you very much. Can I visit you sometime, love, Lily? P.S. Theo says hi, and he misses your chocolate chip cookies." I sat at my kitchen table, holding the letter, the paper warm from my hands. That evening, I called Sarah Patel. Sarah, I want to add something to the trust documents. A letter from me to each of them sealed, explaining everything. They get it when they turn 18. That's unusual, she said, but wise. Quirky aside, some seeds can lie dormant for decades, waiting for the exact right conditions. Fire flood or sudden sun to bloom. Those letters would be my seeds, ready for the moment my grandchildren could choose to understand. That night I wrote until my hand cramped. Not to defend myself, not to indict their parents, but to tell Lily and Theo the truth that mattered, that they were loved always, and that my absence was never about them. When I sealed the envelopes, I felt something inside me seal too, not closure exactly, but the beginning of a long, patient waiting. Academic note in navigation. There's something called dead reckoning, plotting your course based on where you've been, not where you are. With the children, that was all I could do. Keep my head in hope. The wind shifted in our favor. By late autumn, I'd found a rhythm. Mornings in the sunroom with my coffee, afternoons in the garden, or at the library evenings with the kind of quiet that feels earned. The trust funds were fully funded, my estate plan watertight, and my circle of people reduced to those who brought peace instead of paperwork. Then without warning, they showed up. A knock at the front door, and there they were, Andrew and Claire with Lily and Theo in tow. The kids' eyes lit up when they saw me, and instinct overrode every boundary. I opened the door wide. Grandma Lily rushed in, Theo right behind her. "Come in, sweethearts," I said, leading them toward the kitchen. "Cookies and milk." Claire stepped forward, but I held up a hand without looking at her. "They're fine with me." The children sat at the island leg, swinging as I poured milk and set out a plate of cookies. Lily talked about school, Theo about soccer, the sound of them filling the kitchen like a song I'd been missing. When they were happily occupied, I walked outside where Andrew and Claire stood on the porch. "If you ever use these children as pawns to get through my door again," I said evenly, "I will call the police." Andrew looked ashamed, eyes darting to the ground. Claire's gaze, however, slid past me into the house, taking in the chandelier, the car in the driveway, the life she couldn't touch. Her eyes sharpened, and I knew she was calculating. A week later, my phone rang. "Andrew, Mom, do you think there's any way back from this?" "Not while Claire is still trying to control me," I said. "Trust isn't a switch you flip." "What about the kids?" "They'll always be welcome when they're old enough to make their own decisions." Here's your quirky aside. Certain species of salmon swim thousands of miles back to the exact river where they were born. It's in their nature to return no matter how far they've gone. I believed my grandchildren had that in them. Academic note in psychology, there's the concept of earned security, the trust you rebuild in relationships by showing over time that you're safe. That was the only way forward now, and it couldn't be rushed. When we hung up, I realized I didn't feel the hollow ache I'd expected. Just a steady certainty that I'd drawn the right lines, and that holding them was the truest form of love I could give. 3 weeks later, another letter from Lily arrived. This one on lined notebook paper written in pencil with little hearts dotting the I's. "Dear Grandma Eleanor, Dad told me about the money for college. Thank you very much. Mom cried when she heard about it, but I think they were happy tears. I still want to visit you someday. Maybe when I'm bigger, I can take a bus to your house. I love you. P.S. I'm learning to make chocolate chip cookies in case you want some when I visit." I read it 3 times, then tucked it into my jewelry box alongside my mother's pearls and Martin's wedding ring. These were the things that mattered most, tokens of history, promises for the future. The garden outside my window was glowing in the late afternoon light, the maple leaves holding on to their reds and golds like they weren't quite ready to let go. I poured a glass of wine, opened the back doors, and stepped onto the terrace. The air was cool, scented faintly with rosemary from the planters. I thought about what Martin had told me in that hospital room, about money changing people, about testing who loved me for me. He had been right. but he'd also given me something far more valuable than the 8 million, the chance to discover that I was strong enough to live entirely on my own terms. Here's your quirky aside. Some birds, like the albatross, spend years alone over open ocean navigating. By instinct, only returning to land when they're ready to choose a partner again. They are not lost, they're simply free. I was free now. Free to travel without asking permission. Free to spend money on what made me happy. Free to help people who actually appreciated it. Free to refuse entry, literal or emotional, to anyone who mistook my kindness for weakness. Academic note in economics. There's the concept of opportunity cost, what you give up when you choose one path over another. I'd given up proximity to my son and daughter-in-law, but I'd gained peace, self-respect, and the quiet joy of knowing my grandchildren's futures were secure. That night, I cooked dinner just for myself. Pan-seared salmon, roasted asparagus, a slice of lemon tart, and ate it at the dining table with candles lit, because why save the good china for guests who never deserved it? As the sun dipped and the first stars appeared, I put on one of Martin's old jazz records. The notes curled through the rooms like they remembered the way. I let them fill the spaces between my steps as I danced barefoot in my kitchen, my wine glass catching the light. I didn't need an audience. I didn't need permission. I didn't need anything but this, the sound of my own laughter, the warmth of my own home, and the unshakable knowledge that I was exactly where I belonged. 6 months after losing her husband, Martin, Eleanor Hale finds herself belittled and controlled by her daughter-in-law Claire, with Andrew, her son, going along. What begins as help quickly turns invasive, controlling her groceries, critiquing her spending, even suggesting she take a low-wage job. The breaking point comes when Eleanor, feeling ill, asks to borrow $10 for prescriptions, and Claire calls her a lazy old woman. Eleanor remembers Martin's secret he'd invested quietly for 40 years, leaving her $8.2 million, and a warning to keep it secret to see people's true intentions. Claire and Andrew failed the test spectacularly, culminating in a staged family dinner with a geriatric psychiatrist and talk of guardianship to take away her rights. Instead of reacting, Eleanor buys a luxury home, hires top legal counsel, and secures her finances. When Andrew visits, she reveals the fortune in her planned trust funds for her grandchildren, Lily and Theo, locked until they are 25 with no parental access. She delivers a letter to Andrew and Claire explaining exactly what they lost through their manipulation. Over months, she builds a new life, peaceful, independent, and free from their control. Contact with her grandchildren comes through secret letters and a supportive teacher. Eleanor adds sealed letters to the trusts, ensuring the children will know the truth when they are adults. Claire attempts to re-enter Eleanor's good graces, but Eleanor holds the line. Visits from the children are welcome when they can choose for themselves. The trust, once broken, will need proof to rebuild. In her new home, Eleanor embraces freedom, traveling, spending, as she pleases, helping those who appreciate it, and keeping her peace untouchable. She ends where she began, strong, self-reliant, and exactly where she belongs.